There's a new day dawning, the time is at hand, where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in.
All right, let the King of Glory in. Open up the door. Starts right now. So fling wide, you heavenly gates. Hail the way of the risen Lord. The Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was in prison for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And he heard a sound behind him. And he said, behold, I looked. There was a door standing open in heaven. And I heard a voice which was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, come up here. I want to show you some things which must take place. That's what we need, my friends. We need a heavenly perspective of the things that are going on in the world around us. The things that the Word of God foretold us would come to pass. Those things which must take place. Those things which are taking place even now. That is what this broadcast is all about. Discussing the issues of the day, the certain times in which we live, from a biblical perspective and world view. Good day, everybody. Andy White here. What you are about to hear is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul, and I want to welcome everybody from all across the fruited plain and all around the spherical globe. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Open Up the Doors. Hey, do me a favor. I am streaming live over on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page over at facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. If you've never liked the page over there, my Open Up the Doors page on Facebook, please like the page and join in the conversation over there. Let me know where you are watching and listening from as well. And welcome aboard. We are streaming this broadcast as well. If you are outside of the Faith FM broadcast area here on the east end of Long Island, you could download the free Faith FM app. And we have the app both for the Android platform and the Apple platform, of course. Just look up Faith FM in Sag Harbor, and you'll be able to listen to great Christian broadcasting programming here from the east end of Long Island 24/7. Just look up that free Faith FM app. I will plan on going to the phones in the second hour. If you'd like to write down the phone number right now and like to be part of the broadcast, just dial in 631-725-2069. 631-725-2069. All right, I'm going to get to it. Hello, everybody there on Facebook who is joining in and still rolling in onto the stream there. Give me some greetings and salutations over there as well. Some thumbs up on the stream as you enter into the chat room. All right, so let's get it. You know, I know I say this every week. I say this every week. It's so much going on. It's got my head spinning, and I almost don't know where to begin. But I'm going to do something in this first hour, then I'm going to change gears in the second hour a little bit. But I'm going to talk about something I haven't really dealt with too much lately. It's been a couple of years, in fact. But when it comes to the last days signs of the times, I don't often talk about the environmental and meteorological signs of the end times because my natural propensity tends to be more towards Israel and the Mideast and political and geopolitical issues. That's more of the way I'm wired. And there's other watchmen on the wall that delve more into the astrological, environmental, and meteorological signs, as I've said a moment ago. But having said that, as regarding me and my position and the things I discuss on this broadcast on a regular basis, I don't want to neglect it either, because Jesus did talk about the birth pangs of the environmental and meteorological signs, as he stated in several places, but particularly on the Olivet Discourse, both in Matthew 24 and Luke 21. Jesus said there will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in various places. And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. Isaiah prophesied And this is something I'm gonna kind of focus on a little bit in this first hour today, because in Isaiah 24, which is sometimes called the mini apocalypse, the whole chapter Isaiah is talking about really the end times and the return of the Lord, or the setting up of the kingdom of God, God's judgment. Isaiah 24 is like a little mini Revelation, book of Revelation. But in that Isaiah 24, he prophesied, "For the windows from on high are open, and the foundations of the earth are shaken. The earth is violently broken. The earth is split open. The earth is shaken exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard." Some versions say the earth shall stagger like a drunken man. The earth shall stagger. The earth shall totter like a hut. Its transgression shall be heavy upon it, and it will fall and not rise again. That's Isaiah 24, verses 18 and 20. And this passage of scripture was particularly, what's the word I'm looking for, was kind of brought to my memory and into my stream of consciousness, so to speak, this past week, because of some things I've been just reading a lot about in both the secular media as well as Christian news reports. But this whole idea of the earth being shaken, the earth being violently split open, the earth staggering and reeling to and fro like a drunkard. You know, folks, as factually speaking, the earth's axis of rotation is indeed exhibiting an unusual wobble when you look up some of the reports. And this wobble is, to some degree, it's natural, it's always been there, but it's, according to the reports, and why it has triggered me going back and refreshing in my memory out of Isaiah 24, this wobble that's in the earth's axis of rotation is being reported to be more pronounced. Then here's the key: more pronounced than previously predicted and measured. This wobble is known as polar motion. It is, as I said a moment ago, it's a natural phenomena where the planet's spin axis shifts slightly. But recent changes in this wobble, let's use Isaiah's terminology, reeling to and fro. These recent changes are being measured, and they're more rapid, and more dramatic than usual. So, as I said, having said that, there have been some things I've been noticing and coming across and seeing in reports on the news that have caught my attention that I do think we need to be aware of. And again, as I always exhort and encourage this audience, to be aware of them is for the sake of preparation. It's to be aware of what's going on in the world around you, outside of our everyday routine, outside of our little personal spheres of influence and our own little personal, lives. Sometimes because we can get so distracted with just what's in our personal lives, and a lot of that's, a lot of that is, of course, rational, reasonable, and responsible. But we need to, for the sake of preparation, we need to, like Jesus said, watch. And I'm going to get into a bunch of things, but I came across several articles that I want to zero in on, and something that's going on right now. In fact, I'm going to read something that was just came out yesterday in the BBC in their section of the BBC paper or reporting under weather, that, and I've been hearing about this for a couple of weeks now. But again, it's moving forward. And according to the BBC just yesterday, and the actual headline was "Controversial Experiments Exploring the Science Around Reflecting Sunlight with an Aim to Bring About Global Cooling Have Been Announced." Yes, my friends, in Britain, in the UK, they are going to be seeding the atmosphere with sulfur. I'll get into that a little bit more, but let me read this first to set the table. Reported in the BBC yesterday. The Advanced Research and Innovation Agency, otherwise known as ARIA, a government-backed body, is funding nearly 60 million British pounds that actually will allow, because they've approved it, real-world experiments in the UK. Now, number one, a government-backed this UK agency is funding. Actually, no, it's the taxpayers of London. It's the taxpayers of Britain that are funding it. But again, that's these government agencies always think it's their money, but actually, the citizens are funding it. But I digress. But this funding is for an experimentation for the exploring. It's part of the Exploring Climate Cooling Program. I mean, that just oozes with incredulity in my spirit. The Exploring Climate Cooling Program. These are projects in solar radiation modification, which will involve trying to thicken Arctic sea ice and make clouds more reflective. So they want to fool around with the environment. They want to man-induced thicken the Arctic Sea, which is kind of crazy because there's another report that I was going to bring up later, where in the last 2 years the Antarctica has rebounded with the South Pole's glaciers and ice. So we don't need to be doing this man-made because it's happening naturally. But this is just, let me get into this a little bit, because I came across this other article, which is a glorious example of the climate cult's toxic imbecility being put on display. Because what they're planning on doing is, I wish I could say it's science fiction and fantasy. It's not. They're really going to try this. It's nuts. But I got to read this article because, number one, I really liked the way the author, I thought he was just a really good writer. This guy, Thaddeus Makata, in the American Greatness magazine. But the name of his article is Bad Day Sunshine. Remember that old Beatles song, Good Day Sunshine? This guy, throughout this article, just, I guess because it's dealing with the UK, he just started bringing up all these old Beatles songs, but changing the names, like Good Day Sunshine into Bad Day Sunshine. But this is the title of his article, Bad Day Sunshine, with a question mark. Climate dimwits declare war on the sun. UK scientists want to spend, as I just said a moment ago, the 60 million, I was going to say dollars, but 60 million British pounds to dim the sun. You got that right, folks. To dim the sun, to fight climate change. Because nothing says solution like blocking out the thing that's keeping us alive. Right off the bat, I love the way this guy's writing. The moment I read that, I was like on the floor laughing. The LOLs were coming out. Nothing says solution like blocking out the thing that keeps us alive. But he goes on in the article and he says, here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Wrong, Mr. Harrison. Good day, sunshine. Not so fast, Mr. Lennon and Mr. McCartney. Because we're about to block out the sun. Apparently these climate cult dimwits, sunshine on their shoulders makes them anything but happy. Because these white-robed high priests of perfidious Albion's climate cult had this novel idea to control the weather and forestall their impending apocalypse by dimming the sun. Now, I want to say something here, because the first thing that hit me was, years ago, in fact, I think it was around 2019, which would be like, 5 years ago? 6 years ago? I did a broadcast, and I went back and looked it up because I remembered the broadcast. I did a broadcast called Signs in the Sun, where I talked about the sun, what the Bible says about the sun in the last days, and also its effect on Earth's climate and all of the solar activity. I'm not going to reiterate all of that. But part of me doing that broadcast was because all of the global warming, climate change people for years and years and years. And this is a fact. They were denying that the sun had anything to do with climate change. I mean, for years, and I went through it in that broadcast 6 years ago. For years, I was literally getting into debates and arguments with people on social media, like there's nothing unusual about that, of course, about them saying that scientists have said the sun has nothing to do with global change, climate change. And I would just laugh them to shreds. Like, any scientist that's saying that is being bribed, because they're either not a scientist, they're an idiot, or they're just on the payroll of the government, which is really the truth. It's insane to think that the sun has nothing to do with the Earth's climate when it's got everything to do with the Earth's climate. So the first thing that hit me with this article was, here it is. They want to dim the sun. All of a sudden, the obvious is smacking them in the face. The sun has something to do with climate here on Earth. Imagine that. Imagine that. Anyway, this article, I'm not going to read all of it, but let me see. According to the Daily Telegraph, a paper in the UK, a host of possible options for climate control are being considered by scientists with government approval. Scientists are considering blah, 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 blah. Here's what I wanted to get to. Scientists are considering outdoor, that means real time, real life, real existence field trials, which could include, remember this term, injecting aerosols into the atmosphere or brightening clouds to reflect sunshine as a way to prevent runaway climate change. But I thought the sun had nothing to do with it. Anyway, this article, I'm just going to scat read through it. Some of it was really, really funny. But though the dimwits, this is the article, but though the dimwits will be confronting the sun, they assure us that unlike the heedless youth in Greek mythology, remember Icarus, who flew too close to the sun? These climate cultists vow that they will not go down in flames. According to Professor Mark Steins, there will be, quote, a small, controlled outdoor experiment on particular approaches. We're going to do everything that's going to be safe as we inject into our atmosphere sulfur. Yeah, sulfur. They're going to put sulfur into the atmosphere. Let me tell you what they're going to be doing here. Let me see something here. I want to get. This is what they're doing to just like get cut to the chase here, because I could use up my whole hour just talking about this. But this thing that they're doing is called stratospheric aerosol injection. And this involves releasing large quantities of sulfur particles, such as sulfur dioxide, into the stratosphere, which is the upper level of our atmosphere, to act as a reflective barrier against incoming sunlight. Proposals range from shooting particles from artillery guns using large hoses or releasing particles from the back of aircraft. Self-levitating particles, these particles, the sulfur dioxide, will be used to reflect the sun back out of our atmosphere. These are the things that are being considered, and they're going to experiment with. Okay, so stratospheric aerosol injection, the acronym for that is SAI. Now, what they're going to use as a delivery system, and folks, I looked this up, because when I first heard about it, I said that can't be true. But you know what they say, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. The name of the delivery system that they're going to be experimenting with to release sulfur dioxide, that stuff that is like fire and brimstone in hell. The lake of fire is like a lake of sulfur. The delivery system is going to be a balloon system. And do you want to know what the name of this balloon system is? And yes, I'm going to say it again. I looked it up because when I first saw it, I said, this is a joke. This has got to be something out of the Babylon Bee. Nope, it's true. The name of the delivery system is the stratospheric, S, aerosol, A, transport, T, and nucleation, N. Satan. Yeah, Satan. That's the name of the delivery system. I mean, you can understand why I was on the floor rolling in laughter. The stratospheric aerosol transport and nucleation system will deliver sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. What could possibly go wrong with that? Seriously, you can't make this stuff up. I'm just like, you don't know if you want to laugh or cry. But folks, let me say this. To whatever degree, there is a naturally occurring climate change, as I've said throughout the years, most of it, if not all of it, has to do with the sun. Nothing man has done. Anthropogenic global warming is and always has been a myth. But here's the astonishing and unbelievable position of the IPCC and the climate alarmists. Because all of the IPCC reports in the past have assumed that, and this is a quote, that solar activity is insignificant for climate change, as I shared a few moments ago. And folks, that's just plain stupidity. It always was. For those who may not know who the IPCC is, it's the UN's International Planetary. It's what it stands for. I forgot. It's basically their UN climate control cult. It's nonsensical. It's absurd. I want to see where I want to go because I'm running out of time for this first block. Let me just say this to sum this first part up. Again, we're going to build on this as the broadcast develops. But if we had to sum the whole thing up in one simple phrase, it would be this. The biggest factor influencing weather and climate patterns on Earth is the sun. Imagine that. Period. And depending on the Earth's position to the sun at any given time, climate conditions are going to vary dramatically. Oh, is it really? And even create drastic abnormalities that defy everything that humans thought they knew about how the Earth worked. For anyone to say that the sun has nothing to do with the Earth's climate is patently absurd. And now they're actually finally admitting it through their experiments with their imbecilic experiments. Because it's really utterly mind-numbing that any thinking human being would posit such an absurdity that the sun had nothing to do with anything. This big yellow thing. But you know, they had to say that in the past. They've had to say that because for them to have admitted that the sun was really our biggest issue, it would destroy 99.9% of their premises. Anyway, I'm going to build on this a little bit because something happened last week in Europe that is connected to this. But keep it right here for all the fun, laughs, and humor. Here's Casting Crowns, Shadow of Your Wings. Casting Crowns, the Shadow of Your Wings. Welcome back. Andy White here on the radio, tearing down strongholds. You are listening to Open Up the Doors, Integrity in Broadcasting here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in that peak, WEGQ 91.7 in Quagga. We are a lighthouse, beaming the light of truth and reality to those groping around in the dark miasma of an alternative universe. Anyway, I've been talking about some of these strange anomalies that have been going on environmentally and meteorologically in our world. Again, as I said, if you're just joining us, I shared up at the top of the first hour, at the first block, that this is something I don't touch on too often. I tend to like to talk about more of the Mideast things with Israel and geopolitical things and politics. I'm kind of wired that way more. But these are things that are happening, and other things, part of the package of the last days, signs of the times that Jesus talked about. And something happened very ominously just last week. And in the first block, I was referencing this uh, this article where the author of the article was just kind of making jokes about old Beatle tunes. Here comes the sun and other famous songs that had to do with the sun being a good thing, and he was mocking the Brits, saying not anymore. But keeping in line with that motif of using Beatles songs and utilizing them for this topic, so to speak. Back in the day when I was a little kid, some of you might remember that Beatle movie and the album called Yellow Submarine. Well, in the movie Yellow Submarine and on the album, in the movie there was this place where, and it was a cartoon of the Beatles, but the Yellow Submarine was going through this place called the Sea of Holes, and the submarine would go in one hole and come out another hole, and then they would get out of the submarine. If I remember it, I was a little kid when I saw this movie. I haven't seen it in 60 years, but from what I remember, and I do remember this part because it just, as a little kid, it just made me laugh. But at one point in the Sea of Holes, Ringo gets out of the submarine, and he goes walking around, and he picks up a hole. There's like holes on the ground and holes floating around in the atmosphere. Holes floating around in the atmosphere. And he grabs a hole, and he puts it in his pocket. And all of a sudden, with Ringo's cute little English voice, he goes, "I think I got a hole in me pocket." I know. Very, very simplistic. I was like 8 years old when this movie came out. I just burst out laughing. Ringo grabbed the hole, put it in his pocket. He says, "I think I got me a hole in me pocket." Having said all that, well, maybe, folks, on a serious note, we just might have a hole in our magnetosphere. And that's something really serious. We just might have a hole in our magnetosphere. Scientists have been telling us for years that if a CME, a corona mass ejection, those are those big solar flares, if one hits us head on, we could have a geomagnetic storm that could possibly wipe out our electric grids. They've been warning us about this for years, and we're in a time of what scientists call a solar maximus right now. By the way, the sun itself goes through cycles every 11 years. For 11 years is a solar minimum, where there's a little bit of what it says, very little solar activity, and then it goes through a cycle of 11 years, another 11 years, where it's called solar maximus, and there's a lot of solar activity, a lot of sunspots, a lot of solar flares. That's why over the course of the last year, you've been seeing a lot of aurora borealises coming even further south than normally. We've had aurora borealises, northern lights. For those who don't know what an aurora borealis is, northern lights coming down all the way down into even in some southern states last year and recently, and they've been beautiful, and they're a great thing to behold, and that's really cool. But that's coming from this solar activity and these geomagnetic storms that are produced from the sun. And when they just graze the earth or go by the earth, they produce these beautiful colors, and it's wonderful. But if one hits us directly, that's a whole nother issue that could take down and wipe out our grid. And last week, scientists are thinking that that's a strong possibility. One headline said, because there was a big blackout, if you remember, it was about a week and a half ago. It was a big blackout centered in Spain and Portugal, but it also bled into France a little bit and some of the other surrounding countries there in Europe. Folks, Europe was literally, now there was a major blackout in Spain and Portugal, but Europe was literally seconds away from a complete continental blackout of their grid just a week and a half ago. And one of the headlines, and there was a lot of news on this, but one of the headlines that caught my attention was, did a hole in the Earth's rapidly weakening magnetic field cause the electrical blackout in Spain and Portugal? Now, and again, I'm not going to read the whole article. That was the headline. The takeaway is this. Nobody knows what caused that blackout. When I heard the news, of course, my instinct, my natural propensity was to immediately think cyber attack. And it could have been. They could. Hey, I don't deny the fact that they could not want to be admitting it was a cyber attack, and maybe they're distracting us. That possibility is always out there. That aside, if what they're saying here is the other possibility, which is a very valid possibility, this is again something very interesting that is prophetic, and the Bible speaks about. Like I was reading out of Isaiah 24 earlier. So now, what is the magnetosphere? When I said when the article says, that is there a hole in our magnetic sphere? What is that? The magnetic sphere is essentially a shield, it's a magnetic field around the Earth, which, by the way, I can go down 100 bunny trails with this. The magnetic field around the Earth has been decaying at a measurable rate for thousands of years. Scientists know the rate of decay, which points to the Earth actually being very young because it's naturally decaying. And this is a scientific fact. One of the biggest things that would really blow evolution apart about life on the planet is the fact that we have a magnetic field right now, because scientists have measured how fast it decays. And if the Earth was as old as these evolutionists say it was, we wouldn't have a magnetic field and we would not exist. But I went down a bunny trail with that. But the magnetosphere is a shield around the Earth that protects us from these charged particles from the sun, like CMEs, for instance. And they're and not only CMEs, but just radiation from the sun that's constantly bombarding the Earth. Unfortunately, this magnetosphere is steadily getting weaker. And that's just a fact of Earth science. We've always known this. It's just a question of how fast is it decaying. However, here's the anomaly. Scientists recently have told us that every 10 years, this magnetosphere is getting 5% weaker, but now they're measuring it as increasing, where it's actually getting 10% a year weaker. Now, last week, as I mentioned, Spain and Portugal and some other areas of Europe suffered a huge power outage. And the outage, again, was centered in Spain. One report, Renf, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it sounds like it's a Renfe, is Spain's national railroad company, and they said, quote, they put out a report at 12:30 their time that the entire national grid of Spain was cut off, the entire grid. It brought parts of Spain and Portugal to a standstill. It grounded planes, it halted public transport, it forced hospitals to suspend routine operations. And as I said a moment ago, the entirety of Europe was literally seconds away from a continent-wide blackout. The normal operating frequency for Europe's power grid is 50,000, or 50, I guess that's 50,000, 50, no, it just says 50 hertz. The power grid is 50 hertz, kept with an extremely tight margin of plus or minus 0.1 hertz. Anything outside of plus or minus 0.2 triggers major emergency actions. If the frequency had fallen just another 0.3 hertz below, in other words, below 49.5 hertz, they need the power grid to be operating at 50 hertz. If it falls below 49.5 hertz, Europe could have suffered a system-wide cascading blackout. Now, that's what happened. Now they're trying to figure out why it happened. And many scientists and many of the people who know about these things, they're suggesting that a hole in the Earth's magnetic field could have been responsible. Preliminary reports out of Europe about the massive blackout say the cause may have been something called induced atmospheric vibration. There's that terminology going back to Isaiah 24. The Earth wobbles, the Earth staggers about, this wobbling, this vibration, like a drunken man. And again, the only reason we are able to have operational power grids in the first place, and a lot of other things like life, is due to the protection that comes from the Earth's magnetosphere, what it provides. And I already went through this stuff. Earth is surrounded by this magnetic sphere. And what generates that magnetic sphere, somebody might ask? What creates the magnetic field around the Earth? Well, believe it or not, folks, it's generated by the dynamic magnetic forces at the center of the Earth. It's the Earth's magnetic core that feeds and powers our magnetic field. So you see how these things are connected. Now, here's where the sun comes in. Our magnetic field is weakening. It's protecting us from this particle radiation from corona mass injections. But because it is weakening, it's getting in. And if there are holes, and they've discovered some holes around this. So I'm just tying these things together. These are things that are happening in our world around us that really coincide with what the scriptures say about these, environmental and meteorological things that are going on around the world. Man-made climate change is the biggest mass global fraud of all time. It's a fraud. And I think most of us have come to realize that. Climate change isn't happening because of SUVs. It's not happening because of fossil fuels. It's not happening because of anything man's doing. These things are natural on one level and supernatural on another level. And we need to be, again, for the sake of preparation, spiritually, practically, think about if the grid goes down. I've said this so many times through the years. Think about if our grid goes down. Are you prepared for what could be prolonged outages? Do you have water stocked up? Do you have generators? Do you have food in your pantry stocked up? Maybe you don't, and I've gone over this so many times over the years. Maybe you're not able to because you don't have room in your home. Are you networking with others through your church, through your community? People aren't paying attention to these things, but they're happening. And, we often talk about sometimes sudden destruction, a sudden crisis. That's the reason I share these things with you, not because I'm trying to fearmonger, not at all. But these things are happening, and we do need to know about them. But I'll be back with more in a little while. I'm going to go to another break here. Mind and soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Danny White here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in that peak, WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. Just a few broadcast memos here. The first hour of this broadcast re-airs today at 3 p.m. Thursday, and one again on Saturday at 1 p.m. as well. If you miss any portion or part of this broadcast, you can find me over on YouTube and Rumble as well. Just look up Andy White, Open Up the Doors. Those are my video platforms. Please like those platforms, subscribe to them if you haven't already, and share these broadcasts around. They're meant to be resources for the body of Christ, and to be used at your leisure, at your disposal as a resource if you can find them to be such a thing. All right, I'm going to be going to the phones. Be going to the phones in the second hour, the 11 o'clock hour. Write down the phone number, 631-725-2069, 631-725-2069, if you'd like to call in and share your thoughts as well. I'm going to wrap up I got a few minutes here that I want to touch on a couple of things. But, all of this global warming that really isn't happening is giving Al Gore and all the other climate cult imbeciles the cold shoulder, because another report came out this week that the Antarctic ice has increased. It's made a surprising comeback by leaps and bounds. So it's completely blowing up their previous predictions and their previous environmental apocalyptic fake climate change man-made climate change. And here's the thing, folks. Here's the thing where I want to go with this. There is climate change happening, but it's not of the sort that folks like Al Gore and the World Economic Forum and all these climate cultics have been warning us about. It's, as I said a moment ago, it's in part natural and in large part as regards to the prophetic word, supernatural. Things that God is going to be using in the last days to get the attention of people. But we have a lot of things going on. As I said a moment ago, the magnetosphere is weakening and springing holes in it, apparently. And the magnetic North Pole this has been going on for years. I brought this up from time to time. The magnetic North Pole is rapidly moving westward towards Siberia. They've got to keep resetting compasses because of the magnetic North Pole's movement, and it's been increasing. These things are all connected, folks. The Earth's magnetic North Pole, as it's moving towards Siberia, by the way, at a rate of about 34 miles per year, this movement is significantly faster than in the past. It's sped up. And all of these phenomena, the Earth's magnetic sphere, the North Pole, the magnetic North Pole moving, they're all connected to the very thing that's going on with the Earth's magnetic core. All of the things that are going on in the Earth's magnetic core. I said it at the top of the broadcast, but recent studies show that the Earth's spin axis has been drifting faster and further than expected. It's wobbling. Researchers have discovered a subtle but regular wobble. That's Isaiah 24 language. This is from a report that I read the other day. Researchers have discovered a subtle but regular wobble in the Earth's inner core. Now, what does that translate into? Earthquakes. One of the signs that Jesus talked about. One of the, earthquakes, volcanoes. All of these things are interconnected and connected. And these are some of the things that the Lord told us would increase, like birth pangs. Scientists right now are tracking an underwater volcano called Axial Seamount. Axial Seamount, which is a underwater volcano about 300 miles off the Oregon coast. It's ready to blow. They've been measuring it. It's showing signs of an imminent eruption. 300 miles off the Pacific coast of the United States. Researchers at the University of Washington and Oregon State University are closely monitoring the seismic activity and seafloor deformation, indicating that the volcano is approaching a potential eruption, possibly before the end of 2025. But don't worry. So they say anyway. Don't worry. It's too deep and too far away to affect the coast. At least that's what they're telling us. But I want to say something else with all of that in these last few minutes. I want to put this caveat out there. Be weary of exaggerated and alarmist memes and claims. This is important. I came in my research for this broadcast, I came across a lot of things that just were not accurate. There's a meme going around right now on social media stating that there are 79 active volcanoes as of April 29th. And they show this list of all these active volcanoes that have been increasing over the last year. I checked that out. I like to make sure I get things right on this broadcast. This is called integrity in broadcasting. I checked out the claims on this meme. They were inaccurate. People are posting things that are made up all the time, and we need to vet the information carefully because we don't need to fearmonger nor cry wolf and lose our credibility. Check these things out. We do need to keep a watch on these things. We do need to stay informed about these things. Jesus said to watch when you see these things happening. Watch and be ready and be prepared. That's my heart in sharing these things with you all. Because some things are indeed presently occurring. So we need to take heed. Something that's also currently and provably going on right now, that there's a volcano above ground near Anchorage, Alaska, 80 miles away from Anchorage, Alaska. Mount Spur. It's 80 miles away. And that looks like it's ready to blow. And 300,000 residents who live in this area are preparing to get ready, either by evacuating or hunkering down. It's about getting ready. But they don't know when. Obviously, you never know when a volcano is going to blow. You never know. But there are telltale signs. But in the interim, in the preceding this eruption, there's been over 70 earthquakes in the area from this volcano, because all of that molten lava, all this stuff that's going on from the mantle and the inner core of the earth, that's happening. That's having an effect on all of our climate and the things that are going on by way of anomalies in the earth today. And I go back to Isaiah 24. There's the paradigm. That's the takeaway of all this. The increase of the birth pangs. To quote Isaiah once again, for the windows from on high are open. Like, in other words, maybe holes in the magnetosphere, letting in sun radiation, letting in CMEs that will, for the windows. This is poetic language, of course, but look how it aligns with the things we're seeing. Isaiah prophesied, for the windows from on high are open, and the foundations of the earth are shaken. I've shared with you just a couple of things without getting into all of the nitty-gritty and into all of the weeds. I'm not a scientist. But when you do a survey of all these things, it's Isaiah 24 happening right in front of our faces. The windows from on high are being opened. The foundations of the earth are being shaken. The earth is being violently broken. You'll see, Jesus said, earthquakes in many different places. The earth is split open. The earth is shaken exceedingly. The earth reels, staggers to and fro like a drunkard. And ultimately the earth shall totter like a hut. Because here's the judgment of God. All of this is happening is because the Lord says its transgression is heavy upon it. These are just the birth pangs, as I said again, of what is to come. My friends, my dear friends, it's not man-made climate change that we need to worry about. It's the coming wrath of God we need to be worried about. And we need to be warning people that perhaps this so-called climate crisis is really simply a wake-up call to flee from the wrath to come. Repent. The call to repent and to believe the gospel has been going forth and is going forth. For as Peter said, for the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away, the heavens with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Therefore, here's the therefore, brothers and sisters. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness? That's the end game. How do we take all these things? Let's look for the hastening of the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, Peter writes, we, according to his promise, look for the new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. All right, so I am going to stay on theme a little bit. I'm changing gears within the theme. If you're just joining me for the second hour, in the first hour I was talking about what Jesus had mentioned being the signs of the times in the last days in regards to the environmental and astronomical and meteorological signs of the times. Jesus said there'd be signs in the sun, there'd be a pestilence and earthquakes, the seas and the waves roaring around the earth, the heavens being shaken. Isaiah 24 talks about the earth wobbling, and I'm just recapping those that for the people who are joining me right now, those who are there. But part of what I normally focus on, as I said in the first hour, I don't delve too much into that stuff, generally speaking. But again, it's something we need to look at as a whole. But Jesus also said, and I'm going to delve into this because things are heating up in this particular area as well, wars and rumors of wars. And this tends to be a little bit more in my wheelhouse than the other topics, so to speak. But it's all one big package that the Lord told us to be aware of. You'll hear of wars and rumors of wars, nations rising up against nation, kingdom against kingdom. And then there'll be signs in the earth. There'll be earthquakes and famines. Jesus said, when you see all of things occurring, know that the time is short. So Jesus said, when you see all of these things occurring together, occurring concurrently. See, that's been part of the problem that some who have dismissed prophecy and some who call themselves preterists, meaning that all prophecy has already been fulfilled, this is where they fall into an error. And they'll say, well, these things have been happening since time began. There's always been wars. There's always been nation against nation. There's always been earthquakes. So they dismiss the signs in an isolationist sort of way, misunderstanding what Jesus said. What Jesus said is that these signs would be increasing. He purposely used language like a mother in labor giving birth. The birth pangs, they become more intense the nearer the time of the birth. They become more painful. They become more intense. They become more frequent. And that really was the sign to be looking for, not some isolated, volcano or some isolated earthquake. Yeah, because it is true. These things have been happening throughout history, but that's not what Jesus was saying. He was saying when you see these things happen in some abnormal, to use modern day language, some abnormal, crazy, off the rails, chaotic way, all at the same time, then these are the signs. And we are certainly, anyone who's paying any amount of attention, we are certainly seeing that happening. Now, particularly, I want to cover some things that I think are in the immediate future the most dangerous. We could talk about, the earthquakes and the volcanoes and the pestilences and those things like I just did for the past hour. But I think what's the immediate, more immediate than any of that, is the fact that the planet is ready to blow up all over the place in war. These are the wars and rumors of wars that Jesus talked about. Israel's about to go into Gaza in really a fresh, big, new way. They're at a point where they're fed up. They've had it with Hamas, and they're basically going in, and they're going to level Gaza, and they're going to take it over, and they are going to retake it. Now, I like using the word retake it because the Israel haters will say they're going to reoccupy it. Well, it's their land anyway. Biblically speaking, God gave Gaza to Israel. The occupiers were the Palestinians, who don't exist either. The Arabs, who call themselves Palestinians, and especially Hamas, they're the ones who are actually occupying it. It was given to Israel as an everlasting possession. I've talked about that numerous times, and I will continue to. But that's not the only thing going on. You see what's going on in Yemen, where Israel totally took out Yemen the other day as far as their airport goes. You know that Yemen last week, or a few days ago, fired a missile that got through Israel's Iron Dome, and that's kind of worrisome. A missile got through the Iron Dome and blew up dangerously near Ben Gurion Airport. Well, Israel retaliated by basically totally wiping out Yemen's airport completely. They're grounded. And now Yemen is, of course, asking America to stop, asking our forces, asking Trump to stop bombing them, and Trump's going into some preliminary cessation of hostilities right now with Yemen, but that remains to be seen. See what their conduct will be like in the days ahead. But we've got India and Pakistan on the verge of a major war. That's India and Pakistan can tend to be off our radar, so to speak, regarding things like Israel and the immediate Middle East. But India and Pakistan is still really part of the Middle East to begin with, and they're both nuclear powers. And though they've been kind of like having these minor skirmishes throughout the years, this we don't know. Time will tell. But this one seems like it could blow up to be serious. No pun intended in using the words "blow up." There was a terrorist attack in Kashmir last week where 26 innocent people were slaughtered. India has been blaming Pakistan for that terrorist attack. Of course, Pakistan is denying it. Terrorists rarely admit to their atrocities. ISIS always did because they're another breed. But having said that, India did promise to retaliate against that terrorist attack, and rightfully so. They need to. But this thing is quickly escalating, despite all the calls for de-escalation. And then there's what's been going on for the last 2.5 years between Ukraine and Russia, which I think this is all of this. What's going on with Israel? What's going on with India and Pakistan? What's going on with Yemen? What's going on with Iran? Of course, it's all important, and it's all interrelated regarding when we look at it through the lens of eschatology. But we're coming into a time and season, and I say that somewhat. We're coming into. We've really been into. We're just increasingly coming into a time and season when we will see catastrophic and prophetic events happen, not just environmentally and meteorologically, but again, geopolitically. We're going to see prophetic events happen that most people never even imagined were possible, which is exactly what Jesus said. It'll be a time like no other, specifically with Israel and the time of Jacob's trouble. That will be a time such as never been nor ever shall be, specifically regarding Israel. But Jesus did convey that for the world as well. After the tribulation of those days, Jesus talks about how as the tribulation progresses, when we get into it, we're not there yet, folks. We're just in the birth pangs. I want to keep reiterating that. People are always asking, are we in the tribulation yet? Are we in the tribulation? No, we're not yet. We are. There's approaching hoofbeats for sure. Where the trend line is moving that way very quickly. We're seeing things happen in an increasing manner, and they will get exponentially worse, as Jesus said they would. The geopolitical and economic turmoil, the pestilence, the disease, the pandemics, both natural and unnatural, as I've shared many times. China is working through CRISPR technology on ethnic-specific pathogens, where they can release a pathogen into the world that will kill people that are not Asian. An ethnic-specific pathogen. That is a nightmarish thing. And as I've shared in the past, and I have no proof of this, but I believe they're testing these viruses on their own people. I think that's one of the reasons why every several months you see another pandemic in China. I don't think it's because China is some kind of unhealthy, uncouth, unclean people. I don't think that's the reason at all. I think the government has been testing this technology because if they release a pathogen that they know is deadly, and all of a sudden the Chinese people aren't being affected by it, but let's say there are Europeans in the nation or Australian tourists or whatnot, and they all start dropping like flies in the streets, China will say, bingo, we hit it. I know it sounds like science fiction, but they're really working on this. I've shared about this in the past. This ethnic specific pathogen. And the Bible talks about these pathogens, this pestilence in the last days that will kill hundreds of thousands, millions, if not billions of people. I think they're both natural and supernatural and man-made. in the case of things that are happening through the things the Chinese are doing, through this gain of function research that we hear so much about, that our own country, through Anthony Fauci breaking the law. I'm telling you right now, folks, I'm going to go down a bunny trail with this one. Anthony Fauci needs to be indicted and prosecuted. He really does. He lied to Congress. He lied to the American people. He was the one who even Obama banned gain of function research, but Fauci through the NIH went around it. He found a workaround, so to speak. And this stuff is out there. So again, Jesus said these things would get exponentially worse. The geopolitical, economic turmoil, the pestilence, the disease, the natural, and I'm saying natural, put natural in air quotes, the natural disasters, the storms, the earthquakes, as I shared about in the first hour, the signs in the sun, and the sword of war that's coming on this world. Remember, one of the horsemen of the apocalypse, in fact, I believe it's the second horseman, the rider on the red horse, goes forth to kill and to conquer a quarter of the earth's population with war and pestilence and disease. And regarding what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia, we had hope. We had a glimmer of hope as President Trump came into office that he was going to be able to work a peace deal between Putin and Zelensky. At least he was going to try, which is more than the Biden administration ever did. Of course, Trump can sometimes, overstate. We know how it can be. He likes to oversell something. And it seems like it's not really working out the way he had hoped, because it's getting worse. Just at the brink when we thought there were some breakthroughs, there haven't been any. They've all collapsed. And it's what's going on over there in between Ukraine and Russia is alarming to me, because as I've shared in the past, I've got friends over there. I got people over there that I know, missionaries that I've supported for many years over in Kiev. And last night they're saying there's let me move on. I was going to read something else here. Let me get to this. Putin the other day told Zelensky that he wanted to have a 3-day ceasefire. Now, whether he was sincere in that or not, only he knows. But he told Zelensky that if Ukraine were to attack him on or before May 9th, that Russia would rain down upon Ukraine and Kiev these orosinic missiles. They will rain down on you. Those are his words. And so, but despite Putin announcing this 3-day truce a couple of days ago with Zelensky, he wasted no time. Zelensky wasted no time. Instead of de-escalating and trying to work on that little small olive branch, instead, Zelensky and Ukraine directed a drone attack against Moscow and other Russian regions. It's been going on for a couple of days now. And Russia media sources said that the Ukrainian military, this was a couple of days ago. I'm going to bring this up to just last night. They reported, the Russian media reported a couple of days ago, that Ukrainian military is gearing up for even bigger provocations in Moscow. That was from 2 days ago. This morning, the reports came out. In the last 24 hours, the Russian Federation has faced the most massive drone attack in its history. Now, let me stop for a moment. Some might say good, and some might say bad. Putin deserves it. Certainly does. Zelensky's angry. Maybe rightfully so. But the point is this. An olive branch was ostensibly held forth, and Zelensky slapped it out of his hand and came back with a fury, which Putin already said, do that and you're going to face this. So I have some concern for my friends in Kiev. all the people, of course, all the people. But again, this becomes personal for me in some ways. But last night, according to the official data from the Ministry of Defense, the Russian air defense systems across the country shot down as many as 524 Ukrainian drones in the last 24 hours, the most massive drone attack in Russia's history. The number far exceeds all previous attempts at Ukrainian drone strikes and indicates a change in tactics on Zelensky's part. What is even more shocking is the fact that this is not the full extent of the attack. Along with hundreds of drones, Ukrainian forces also launched 5 Neptune missiles, 6 JDAM guided air bombs, and 2 HIMARS multi-barreled rockets. All of these threats, according to the Russian ministry report, again, is it being truthful? Well, it seems like it's being verified. Now Russia's claiming they shot them all down. Again, I don't know. The point is this. It begs the question. What will be Putin's response? Will he use a tactical nuke on Kiev? I pray not. I pray not. But he did very pointedly 2 days ago said, if you attack us on or before May 9th, we will rain these missiles down upon your head in Kiev. Sources are saying that Ukrainian officials, the government, is already fleeing Kiev. They're evacuating families abroad because they know what's coming. And this is a good move. This is a good move on the Ukrainian government's part. They're evacuating, but it's almost like, guys, you brought it on yourself. I don't even know what to say about this, folks, other than to pray. If you know people there in Ukraine, if you know people there, maybe you know people in Russia. This works both ways. This works both ways. There are Christians. There's a church in Ukraine. There's a church in Russia. And, what always happens with these wars is that the innocent suffer the most. But what's going on in Russia, Putin has ordered the Russian military to finalize strike targets in Kiev using these Oroshinik missiles. So there is that. So, heating up. And how is that going to spill out? What kind of ancillary effects? What kind of, ripple effects will that have in regards to pulling the U.S. further into this quagmire, pulling NATO, pulling Europe further into this quagmire? Because at this point in time, you've got 2 egomaniacs, Putin and Zelensky, who hate each other. And it doesn't seem like either of them are caring much about the ramifications of their actions. But moving right along from the Ukrainian-Russian front and that war that could be on the verge of taking a very unfortunate and dangerous turn of events, let's move on, because there all these other things happening here. Israel as well. Israel's gearing up for a new, they're getting ready for a new incursion to really put the final nail in the coffin of Hamas. And they need to do that. But the IDF is preparing to deliver a decisive blow to Hamas in the coming days. And so we're watching for that as well. They've given Hamas one final opportunity to release the hostages and lay down their arms. If they do not comply, the next step will be the complete defeat of Hamas. And the Israeli Defense Force said this time we will not stop. The IDF, the Israeli government, has already announced they are sending tens of thousands of emergency call-up orders to reservists. They are boosting their forces even as I speak. Another 60,000 personnel personnel. 60,000 call-up orders have been distributed and will be distributed to reserve forces in the coming days. So in the coming days, we're going to see how things heat up in Russia and Ukraine. In the coming days, we're going to see how things heat up with the ongoing situation in Israel with Gaza. And remember, that's not just Israel and Gaza. That, by definition, inherently and intrinsically includes working on the northern front in Lebanon with Hezbollah and whatever the Houthis might continue to inflict or try to inflict upon Israel, all being sourced and energized by Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu the other day, in regards to this new and upcoming offensive to be done in Gaza, said this the other day: "I've said many times, whoever attacks the state of Israel will pay the price. Yesterday, I made it clear that the Houthi attack wouldn't be met with a one-and-done response, but with multiple strikes. Yesterday, we struck hard at the Hudaydah port in Yemen." Now, this is going back. I said about Gaza, but I misspoke. I'm talking about the back and forth going on with the Houthis in Yemen. The other day, as I said, the Houthis landed a missile near Ben Gurion Airport, but Netanyahu said this is 2 days ago, I believe. Today, which would have been, I guess, Tuesday, our aircraft hit Sana'a Airport, an airport that enables the terror army, serves as an aerial gateway to the terror state, and facilitates missile launches against us. We decide when to respond, how to respond, and what to target. That's kind of that's kind of like when Netanyahu says we decide when we respond, how to respond, and what to target. That's really what's the word I'm looking for? An admonition, not to the world, but particularly to the U.S. Because sometimes, our government, our administration tries to pull the reins in a little bit on Israel. And, they've about fed up with it. I mean, Biden was terrible, terrible, terrible. Not Bush, geez. Trump is obviously working much, much better with them. But nevertheless, the Israelis are a little concerned because Trump entered into this ceasefire agreement with Yemen yesterday. And basically, Netanyahu is saying, well, that's fine on your part, but if they hit us, we're still going to respond. We're not having any ceasefire agreements with them unless they stop. And then he went on to say, we decide when to respond, how to respond, and what to target. And that includes the Houthis' patron, Iran. Without Iran's approval and ongoing support, the Houthis couldn't carry out their vile missile campaign against us. And we will settle accounts with them, even as we're kind of playing, I shouldn't say footsies. I don't think this administration is playing footsies with Iran. Maybe they're just going through these quote-unquote new negotiations with Iran. Maybe it's just to show that we're trying to make the attempt. Because the Iranians aren't going to shut down their nuclear capability. They're not going to stop their pursuit of a nuclear bomb. They're just not going to do that. Even if they say they're going to do that, they're not going to do that. You can't trust them. So we've got that kind of hanging over our heads as well. Things are heating up, and they're heating up a lot in the wars and rumors of wars situation. If you want to call in, 631-725-2069. 631-725-2069. I just want to keep throwing that out there because I give you permission to interrupt my stream of consciousness here. I'm just keeping up with these news reports and keeping you informed so as to not lose. Again, it's like I say this all the time. We here in America, we're not, because the media is not, our dead stream media is not really reporting on the things that matter all that much. and they keep us focused on a lot of the domestic nonsense that's going on. And it's important to know domestically what's going on. I talk about it all the time. But we can't let that we can't let that distract us from the larger picture. And that's why I report these things to you. Again, to prepare spiritually, materially, physically, psychologically, to know what's going on, so that you're not caught unawares. So that a day of trouble won't catch you by surprise. I hate to sound like a broken record. I hate to keep beating this horse to death, but it's in my heart, in my spirit, what God said to Ezekiel, son of man, when you see the sword coming, if you don't raise up your voice and warn the people, you have blood on your hands. Warn the people of what's coming, so that they are able to prepare. Some of us have to prepare by repenting and stop living our lives as though nothing is happening. Stop living our lives as practical atheists. We need to repent. Time is running out. Time is running out. Noah built that ark for over 100 years. It was a warning with every swing of the hammer, with every nail, with every planing of the wood to fit into joint. It was a prophetic warning of things to come. Oh, it took a while. People say, "Oh, Noah, you've been building that silly boat for 25 years. Noah, you've been building that silly boat for 50 years. Nothing's happened. Nothing's happened, and we don't believe anything's gonna happen." Folks, hear me. It doesn't matter what things look like right now. The prophetic word is sure. The prophetic word is true. God will see that all of his plans and all the things that have been written, he will see to it that they will come to pass. So that's the purpose. That's my heart. That's my intention in all of this. Be alert. Be aware. Pray. Seek God. Preach the gospel. Let people know what Jesus said about the signs of the times. When people ask you, "What do you think about this?" We've got the answer. When people say, "What do you think about this situation, that situation?" Don't fall into the trap of just talking about it from a humanistic political viewpoint. We can tend to do that. But always keep in mind God's plan, God's purpose in it all. Jesus said that before the end comes, that the preaching of the gospel, this gospel of the kingdom, will be preached in every nation. Believe it or not, there are still people groups that have not heard the gospel yet. I heard a missionary recently say that there's still 1/3 of the planet that has never heard the gospel. We think in the age of the internet and the age of computers and in the age of mass communication that everyone's heard by now. But believe it or not, there are areas of this world that still don't have internet, still don't have mass communication. Yet Jesus said the gospel of this kingdom will be preached in all the world as a testimony to them. So we need to be praying about these things, not just sort of like navel gazing. Not sort of just sitting in an arena watching gladiators beat each other up and kill each other. No, we've got an appointment. God has appointed us in these days and hours and times. God has ordained us and appointed us to go and preach the gospel to every nation, to every creature, to the best of our ability. We're not all called to be missionaries in foreign lands, but we can all help missionaries. We can send. If you can't go, you can still send. If you can't go, you can still support. You can support financially. You can support in prayer the preaching of the gospel of the kingdom. Because, folks, this world has only got one prayer. Wars and rumors of wars. The signs of the times. Ukraine, Russia heating up. Israel and the Mideast heating up. Now, these things have been out of boil, various slow boil, throughout the last couple of years. But now there's a new one on the stove, so to speak. And things are heating up there as well, over in India and Pakistan. And again, any of these wars, any of these hostilities, all of them have the what's the word I want to use? They all have the possibility of having ripple effects and dragging other people in, because all these nations have different allies and different treaties and different alliances with other neighbors in the surrounding area. But Newsmax's headline from this morning: India and Pakistan on brink of major war. And again, just to reiterate, you've got two nations that have been nipping at each other for years, and they're both in possession of nuclear weapons. And part of my wonderment, what I'm wondering, India is a nation of over 1 billion people, 1.25 billion people, something like that. Pakistan doesn't have that many people. Would Pakistan be the first to launch a couple of nukes over there just to try and even up the playing field? I don't know. They have them. God forbid they would use them. But all this has started because Pakistan warned that it would seek revenge from those that were killed by Indian airstrikes the other day that New Delhi said were in response to an attack in Kashmir, as I shared earlier in the broadcast. But this whole thing is signaling an imminent escalation. They're seeing the worst violence in decades between these two countries. At least 43 deaths were reported so far from yesterday's, or the day, was it the day before or a day and a half ago, when India attacked Pakistan. The Pakistanis are saying that 43 deaths have been reported so far. They're claiming, who's to know, but this is what was being reported. They're claiming that 31 civilians were killed by the Indian airstrikes and firing along the border, and New Delhi adding at least 12 dead from Pakistani shelling. And this is where the saber rattling gets even worse, because Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said in an address to the nation last night, "We make this pledge that we will avenge each drop of the blood of these martyrs." Now, India's army said it destroyed 9 terrorist camps. India's claiming they haven't struck any of the infrastructure. They haven't even struck any military camps, is what they're claiming. But they're claiming that they've only struck terrorist camps in Pakistan yesterday. So again, we're just seeing this area heating up. It's something to be alert about. Just don't be going your merry way, and all of a sudden you turn the news on and you hear about two countries shooting nukes at each other, and take it all like, oh, where did that come from? It's out there. And again, I am in no way or shape or form hoping that this will happen, but there's the potential. There's just the potential, because these people, as I've said, they've been at each other's throats for decades, especially over Kashmir. Pakistan claims Kashmir for itself. India claims Kashmir for itself. So there is this land dispute in the mix. But it's more than just a land dispute. Pakistan is essentially an Islamic nation. It's a Muslim nation. India is mostly a Hindu nation, and the Islamists in Pakistan hate the Hindus. Now, India has a large Muslim population as well as a large Christian population, but the predominant, overwhelming religion there in India is Hindu, and the Muslims absolutely hate the Hindi. So add the whole who does Kashmir belong to, along with the religious ingredients, and you got something that can really flare up and blow up, no pun intended, really quickly. I'm just gazing through this article. It gets into the weeds about who's accusing who of what, who's saying what about what, who's saying they're going to do this in retaliation to this. Of course, the world is calls for restraint, coming from, of course, the UN. Of course, we've got to do that. Restrain. America's calling for restraint. The world's calling for restraint because, and honestly, this could potentially be huge. Yesterday, U.S. President Donald Trump called for a halt to the fighting, adding, "If we can do anything to help, I will be there." And again, I hope he means that he'll be there diplomatically, because the last thing I think America and the American public is in the mood for at all is to get involved in another foreign war between nuclear powers. But having said that, I said a moment ago, we have alliances. We just signed an economic agreement with India just last week. So again, the potential for being dragged into these things is really high up there. A lot of potential for a lot of bad things to happen. But bad things to happen that we were forewarned about by the Lord. And that's the whole point. None of this should be taking us by surprise whatsoever. But be warned. Be alert. Be prepared. I'm going to sound like a broken record, folks. I'm just going to keep doing it. Stock up. Whether it's the grid is taken down because of a corona mass expulsion taking the grid down, which basically is a sun-induced EMP, electromagnetic bomb, an EMP, electromagnetic takedown of our grid. Whether it's done naturally through the sun, or whether it's done because of an attack. They've been talking about attacks on our grid for a long time now, and the enemy knows this. I got time for one more report that came out the other day. Unconfirmed reports and rumors. Recent social media discussions suggest that Iranian-made surface-to-air missiles known as MANPADS have been smuggled into the United States, of course, via the southern border. These discussions stem from claims made during an interview on the Sean Ryan show, where an intelligence officer reportedly disclosed that at least 2 such missiles were confirmed. These are the claims. 2 surface-to-air missiles have been confirmed to have entered our country through Iranian insurgents through our southern border. No official comments or statements from our government agencies have verified these claims, have verified these sources, but that's out there in the ether as well. It's out there in the atmosphere as well, And I've said for many years. Almost hate to leave this on a negative note, but again, it's take heed to the things you hear. Because I have been saying for many years, I believe America will be hit by a surprise, multi-pronged, coordinated attack by China and Russia and Iran. I've been saying this for years. It's not a secret. But that the main invasion will be coordinated attack between China and Russia with Iran. This is the point. I've been talking about Iranian sleeper cells for years in this country. They are here. And they are trying to do sabotage missions on our local infrastructure and power grid targets. So when I saw this report just yesterday about, again, the statement being that these are confirmed reports of missiles, Iranian-made missiles coming into our country through the southern border, I go back to something I wrote many years ago about these sleeper cells working sabotage missions on our homeland. And here it's coming out in the news on a daily basis, even now. My point in saying all this, stay in prayer, keep looking up. God's word is true. Be prepared spiritually, materially, financially, every way possible, and preach the gospel. And keep it right here on Faith FM for some more gospel preaching. I'm out of time. I'll be back next week, same bat time, same bat place. Dating myself with this Batman stuff. But folks, God bless you all. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening. And keep it right here on Faith FM.